Doing all right? So just so you know, Mark knows how to set this up.
Okay.
I don't think, I think I showed Daryl once, but not, he probably needs a couple more times. Trust me, it's been in a lot worse shape.
Yeah, we were able to get online and get with everything, but yeah.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Allen?
Present.
Commissioner Norwood?
Here.
Commissioner Siragusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts? Here. Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Orr?
Here.
And Mayor Pinkinen.
Here. Thank you. Item 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to item 3, study items 3.1. Discussion on current and possible future Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission funded projects at Woodring Regional Airport.
Justin's going to introduce.
Okay. Oh, good.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We have Director Arties here with the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. He leads the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. He's given us quite a bit of funding over the years out here at Woodring Airport. So he is thankfully came up and given us his time to come speak to us. So I'll just pass it over to him and let him speak away.
All right. Thanks, Keston. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Glad to be here this evening, and do have a few paper handouts to hand out, and I don't know that I have everyone for staff, but I do have them for council. So if you don't mind taking one of those and passing it down. And they are slate.
They're slippery.
Yeah. And one of those pass it down, and one of those pass it down. And Gerald, I may call on you. I think I was here, it was about 5-6 years ago, and kind of had a little state of the aerospace discussion. And so some of you may have seen the first handout, the teal handout. That's a study we did in 2017 that was published, and we'll talk a little about that. But the rest of it's all brand new publications information. And for the public, it can all be found on our website, oac.ok.gov. As Keston mentioned, my name is Grayson Arties. I'm the director for the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. We are the state agency for all things aviation aerospace here in Oklahoma. And as a lot of you know, given the excitement around aerospace here in this community, it's our state's second largest industry. We are known as an MRO state. We're also known as a state that builds a bunch of pilots up and develops those pilots, whether military or civilian. Obviously, we've got Vance Air Force Base right here in the backyard. We got Altus Air Force Base, which is doing some heavy training, and then we have 3 4-year institutions in the state of Oklahoma doing civilian flight training and aviation programs, not to mention a lot of the 2-year colleges, some private universities, as well as the litany of private FBOs and individual flight instructors across the state of Oklahoma. Long heritage and history going back to the days of Wiley Post and Clyde Cessna, who was doing some testing right out here in this vicinity of the world, and Clyde was the one that got away. I know a lot of you know Brent Kissling, our director of the Department of Commerce, one of our close friends who we work with probably the most in state government. And man, if Brent and Commerce were around back in the 19-teens and 20s, I think Cessna would be here in Oklahoma, but they went up to Wichita. But they did do all their testing, and they started right here in Oklahoma, and we're proud of that, proud of what Wiley Post had done. And that's created this center of, you might call it, energy surrounding aviation aerospace, and that's where we got our start. You look at where we came from, where we're at today. Oklahoma is known as an MRO state. We keep airplanes flying. We're not like Wichita, where we build new airplanes, or Boeing in Seattle, or Airbus in Alabama. We keep airplanes flying, and that's what a lot of our airports, it's what a lot of our aviation aerospace industry does. And you see there in the economic impact study that we released in 2017, it's our state's second largest industry, $44 billion a year of annual economic impact, 205,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs. And these are good paying jobs. About 120,000 of those 205 are direct jobs, directly employed in the aviation aerospace industry. And when we did this study, the average annual salary was a little over $73,000 a year. And at the time, that was almost double what the average Oklahoman made. We're going to do a recap of that study. We'll start that off here later in this calendar year and hopefully publish it by the end of 2024. And I think it will continue to show that aviation aerospace is our fastest growing industry. And most people ask me the question, well, why? What's so important? I mean, other than my personal opinion, it's the coolest, most exciting industry to be a part of. No offense to our friends in agriculture or energy or biotech or anything else. But aviation aerospace has always hearkened at the hearts of Americans in a certain way. You think back to World War II or the space race or the Cold War. We always wanted to be a part of aviation aerospace and help move our country forward and be seen as the leaders in this industry. Same thing for Oklahoma. Unfortunately, Oklahoma, it's one of our best kept secrets. I had a grandfather that was a pilot, grew up in aviation, but I really didn't know what aviation aerospace can mean for our state until I got into this role at the Aeronautics Commission. And you have this asset in your community at the Woodring Airport. We have 108 public municipal airports across the state of Oklahoma that are in the system. Most of those are in the federal system, receive federal dollars. But most of those airports, as you have the luxury of having, are self-sustaining. So you're an enterprise fund here, as Keston tells me, and you don't rely upon city budgets except for some of those big-time projects that you guys have. Most airports don't have that luxury, and so pat yourself on the back. You have a good one here in the Enid Woodring Airport. You're also one of the few airports that has food at the airport. That's a nice little calling card for us pilots and aviators to get out and stretch our wings and go have a $100 hamburger. And no, that's not what Keston charges for his hamburgers at the airport. It's a $5 hamburger. It takes $95 to get there, though. So hence the $100 hamburger reference. Or if you're going to Ponca City, the $100 burrito, depending on what your flavor of the day happens to be. And so most people ask, well, why aviation aerospace? And I'm going to get to that answer. It's to help diversify the Oklahoma economy. We've seen the boom and bust cycle in Oklahoma for years and years. And that's, of course, having an economy that's based on a commodity, whether it's oil and gas or agriculture. But when you look at aviation aerospace being a somewhat primarily manufacturing or service-related industry as it stands here in Oklahoma, we want to help smooth out that roller coaster ride in Oklahoma. We want to be able to have an opportunity so when the overall economy of the country is down, Oklahoma is still moving forward. In aviation aerospace, and I say that aviation aerospace has somewhat accomplished that. You look at some of the past times of the downturns and the busts in Oklahoma in the 1980s and the 90s, compared to where some of the busts that we've had lately here in the last decade and a half, they haven't been nearly as bad in Oklahoma because aviation aerospace has grown so much, because this is so important to our economy. And if we can lift up as a state the entirety of aviation aerospace, it will benefit everybody, because at the end of the day, our state capital, if we can diversify our state revenues, those revenue streams coming in can help our state legislature. And when the down times are down, they're not going to be nearly as down as much. And so therefore, our state can allocate to those necessary core resources from the state capital. And at the end of the day, we want our kids, and who doesn't, to have a good job opportunities, to stay here right here in Oklahoma. I had a lot of kids I graduated college with that went to Texas, went to Colorado, California, East Coast, West Coast, and left for good paying jobs. But we want people here in Oklahoma to grow up, become educated, go on to college if they want to go on to college, but they don't have to go on to college to get an aviation aerospace job. Have that job, live here, raise a family here, and they can do that in aviation aerospace. Not only can they do that in aviation aerospace, but it's a really exciting job. And so that's where Enid can plug in, whether it's the Enid Municipal Airport in Woodring, whether it's the Enid School District, and I know you guys are plugging in heavily on your aviation aerospace pathways. But at the end of the day, Enid Woodring Airport has had a great luxury for the revenue streams that it has seen. So whether it was the major runway extension we did just about 6-7 years ago and extending out to 8,000 feet for an alternate landing site for Vance, and I think we're finally going to get that main runway shut down, which was one of the primary reasons for extending that runway and having that backup for when Vance's main runway goes down. But you guys also have a little company called ASIC at Enid Woodring, who takes Cessna Caravans out of the jungle in parts and pieces and brings them back to Enid America, puts them back together and sells them. World renowned. Same thing happens at other communities all across Oklahoma. These small to mid-sized companies that may only employ 20, 50, 100 people are the backbone of what aviation aerospace is trying to do in Oklahoma. And so you have an asset in the Woodring Airport. You had that runway extension several years ago, beautiful new terminal building about 3 or 4 years ago, and you're just now going to tap into some big-time dollars for whether it's hangar projects, apron projects for Vance's and Vance's extra aircraft they're going to send over. I know we're trying to get some radar installed there in the control tower, and you guys are doing a really good job of tapping into what I would call unique resources. Because most of the time, everybody holds their hand out and says, hey, FAA, give me more money. And certainly Enid has done a good job at that, and you have received good FAA dollars for your airport, but you've tapped into some really unique revenues, whether it's EDA, whether it's the DSIP projects, whether it's the P3 financing from the Department of Commerce, whether it's state funding from the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. I would say probably of any airport in the state, Enid has been able to tap into the most different styles of revenue to bring to the airport for those capital infrastructure. And that's something that I would continue to recommend you do, because at the end of the day, the FAA handouts have stayed the same since 2001. And yes, we're working with Congress to try and reauthorize the FAA program for the next 5 years, and hopefully we'll get some more money through the FAA programs. But that's not what we can make our bread and butter on. We have to be able to look to some of those innovative programs. As an 8,000 plus foot runway, you have one of the top 10 longest runways in the state of Oklahoma. That's something to be proud of, something to use as a recruitment asset in your economic development efforts to bring new companies to the Enid area. It doesn't have to be an MRO company. It could be a new manufacturing company. It could be something in the new technology sphere, like unmanned aircraft systems and advanced air mobility. It could be another sister company for ASIC to help them maybe do some engine repair. We've got several great engine shops here in the state of Oklahoma, and I know more that are looking to come to Oklahoma. And so I say all this to say that now is the opportune time to really accelerate the growth of the Enid Woodring Airport. And Keston didn't, tell me to say all this. We like Keston. He's a good guy, and he's doing great at the airport. But really, for not just the benefit of Enid, but the benefit of the state of Oklahoma, you guys see the airport as an asset to the community, and you see it as a sales asset so that you can help sell the Oklahoma message of, hey, bring all your companies to Oklahoma, whether we're calling from California, whether we're calling from Texas, East Coast, you name it. We've seen a net positive of companies coming to Oklahoma because of the policies, because of our existing industry and our clusters that we have here in Oklahoma, and because of the Department of Commerce doing a really good job of recruiting new companies to Oklahoma and seeing that aviation aerospace is wanting to grow. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that you guys have decided, and you guys being the community of Enid, jump into the deep end on the aero education efforts. So just to give you a little background history, workforce has been our biggest challenge because we are the best kept secret in the state of Oklahoma, and because aviation aerospace hasn't had anything really exciting to talk about on a national level since the end of the Cold War, and the space race has really kind of become mundane. And I'm thinking back here in the 90s, early 2000s, we took for granted aviation. There really wasn't that drive and that passion to join an aviation aerospace career for the better part of probably 3 decades, until now. We now have commercial space transportation. We now have this thing called drones and unmanned aircraft systems, or commonly referred to advanced air mobility, that is generating a lot of excitement, but we're paying for the sins of those 3 decades in that we don't have pilots, we don't have the workforce we need, we don't have the engineering talent that we need, and we're really behind the 8 ball as an overall industry and as an overall industry here in Oklahoma. And so about 5, 6 years ago, there's this little program that the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, a worldwide pilot association, put together a free curriculum 4 years in high school that prepares kids for aviation aerospace careers. Yes, there's certain pathways that kids can pick, but it's just a general overview of what aviation aerospace can hold. And we started off with 1 school in Oklahoma teaching it in 2017, 2018. 1 went to 9, 9 went to 15, 15 went to 22 to 30, and now we have 57 schools teaching that program here in the state of Oklahoma this year. We're hoping to make it to 75 or 80 for next school year. And Enid, we talked to Enid probably about 18 months ago, and at the time, it was, hey, we've got this program, we've got it here in about 30 schools. Given Enid's connection with Vance and the Woodring Airport, you guys are very much top of mind when it comes to aviation aerospace careers. You might be interested in this. And we thought, yeah, Enid might go put 1 schedule on the list and maybe have 20 students. And I think last I saw, you guys have 80 to 100 students in, I think, 4 different sections, maybe 5 sections of aviation, and are looking to expand and grow that from there. And so you've done a really good job of ensuring that your students and your kids, your youth here in Enid, have that opportunity and are going to be better prepared when they leave high school to either go to college, go to a career tech system, and become educated in an aviation aerospace career. And that's probably the most exciting thing, and one of the things I want to end on tonight is aviation aerospace has a plethora of career options. When I talk to kids, and try and talk to kids at least once a week, go into a classroom at the middle school, high school, elementary school level, and say, hey, do you want to join an aviation aerospace career? And the first thing they think of is, well, I can't be a pilot. I got glasses on. Or, I can't be a mechanic. I'm not, I'm not inclined with my hands. I don't like doing touch labor. And it's the first thing out of their brains. And it's like, no, you can do, if you want to be in aviation aerospace, you can do anything you put your mind to. You want to be an accountant? Hey, that's great. We need accountants. Aviation needs lots of accountants. All of US DOT's accounting for the country happens down in Oklahoma City at the FAA Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. Great accountants. You want to be a doctor? Great, go be an aviation physician. There's this thing called the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute at the FAA Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. They're doing all kinds of physiological testings on how the body reacts to flight and how the body reacts to altitude. Every job that you can imagine can be done in aviation aerospace. And so that's my plea to kids, to parents, to educators, to all of you here on this council this evening, is go share that story about aviation aerospace. Help us make this industry not the best kept secret in the state of Oklahoma, because if we can all do this work, and we're only a 13-man agency at the Aeronautics Commission, if we can all do this work and lift up a little bit more on aviation aerospace, I guarantee you our next commercial airline flight may not be delayed because we're looking for a crew, or the Air Force may not have the cry that it needs. I was hearing that the Air Force is having to look at maybe $50,000 to $75,000 bonuses to bring pilots back for their second sign-up after they did their first tour of duty. We're not going to be in that situation if everybody can come together and say, hey, aviation aerospace, it's important for our state, it's important for our country, it's important for our community. Have you thought of a career, young man or young woman, to join aviation aerospace? And it doesn't require a college degree. Our career tech program is second to none here in the state. When it's all said and done here in about a year and a half, we'll have 7 A&P schools and at least 2 or 3 other career tech programs that are not doing full A&P but doing certifications. Tinker's got a great deal. You can go right out of college, right out of high school, not go to college, spend 18 months at an A&P program with career tech, go on to Tinker Air Force Base, make $50,000 a year your first year. In fact, we can do one better, American Airlines in Tulsa. We had the number 2 at American Airlines speaking at our Aero Day reception at the Capitol last year. And he said, kids, we had about 200 kids in the audience on the 4th floor rotunda. He said, kids, I have a story I want to tell you. 18 months after high school, you get your A&P, you come work for American Airlines making $75,000 a year. In 6 years, without overtime, making $130,000 a year at American Airlines. Can you think about that? Add that math up, that's a 26, 27-year-old making $130,000 a year without overtime at American Airlines. And those people are retiring left and right, and they're hiring left and right at American Airlines. These are amazing jobs, they're great paying jobs, and they don't all require a 4-year degree. And that's the message that I want to share. Use your airport as an economic development asset, but more importantly, use that as an asset to get your kids involved in aviation aerospace and maybe spark a little bit of that passion moving forward. And so I know I wanted to talk to you about airport funding, and yes, there are opportunities for airport funding. I would highly recommend, now that Congress is back in the game of using community designated spending requests, formerly called earmarks, I would highly recommend tapping into that. That's an untapped potential for the state of Oklahoma. I was just in DC last week. In Oklahoma, we have 2 congressmen that are chairs of committees, 2 of 5. The state of Florida has 26 congressmen, not a single one's a chair of a committee in the House of Representatives. We punch above our weight in Oklahoma. We do a darn good job. Even though we lost Senator Inhofe, by golly, that is hurting on aviation. I can promise you that. It's going to hurt on defense too. We punch above our weight as a congressional delegation in Oklahoma. And so I'd encourage you to use that. If you guys have a unique project, maybe the apron project that we have coming up, which is currently slated in our airport construction program, but maybe use congressionally designated spending as a way to accelerate that apron project, which will help out the civilian side, might help out the military side. But I would encourage you to look at that for unique projects that may not be traditionally eligible from the perspective of OAC wants to put this forward to FAA, but certainly Congress can direct FAA to go do those particular projects. And so I would encourage you to look at that moving forward. And of course, I don't have to tell you all about the other sources of funding because you tap into those pretty regularly. Continue doing so, and I promise you, you'll have an airport that will be a great economic development asset. And if you look in some of those handouts I provided you, you can see the millions of dollars of economic impact that the Enid Woodring Regional Airport provides to the community, above and beyond just being a great asset and a great reliance for Vance Air Force Base. It really is an asset for the community, and I would love to stand for any questions that you might have. And my contact information, I've got some business cards here. If you don't get me before I leave, Keston certainly knows how to get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, and my staff would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have as well. So, thank you all.
All right, I don't think we have any questions, but thank you so much for the presentation, for the update. I agree 100% with the idea that we need to educate more people to be involved in aeronautic-related careers, and the pitch was perfect. I couldn't be happier about Enid embracing that in all the schools that are here. So I think we're on the right track. We got to keep it going, but really appreciated your message.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, members of the council.
Next up, item 3.2, Call Lake Water Supply Program Update.
Outstanding. That's it. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Eric Flady, Garver, your Program Manager for the Enid Call Lake Water Supply Program. Before I get started, Mayor Hankonen, I want to thank you and Commissioner Allen for your service all these many years to this program. Commissioner Nord, we'll see what comes, and that certainly goes across for everybody on this body. It's very important what we're doing here. It certainly takes unity to persevere. Garver has been with the city of Enid on this program since the beginning in 2015, and we're here to see it through, certainly along with that body, your city staff, and Garney Construction and their contractors. So, and Mayor, I want to thank you for the recognition at the State of the City address.
Okay.
It's very much appreciated. It's certainly no small feat to tap a pipe into Caw Lake over east of Ponca City, transmit that raw water 70 miles across 4 counties. We have 230 parcels we cross, of which many of those parcels have tenants and multiple owners with interest in their land. So 230 parcels equates to nearly 400 plus various landowners that are stakeholders in some manner or fashion to this work. We've got 120 different permits from many different jurisdictional entities, federal, state, county, tribal, even right here with the city, and certainly the oil and gas industry. So this is a big deal. Today, it's all down to getting it built. So Jason here later in the presentation, I think is going to knock your socks off with some great photos of all the work that's been happening. And then before we get started, I certainly want to go through and just quickly remind the audience and folks out there on what we're building. And then pick up where we last left off. From there, we're going to move into talking about some support Garver's providing. Jason will go through that construction status. I want to close out with a quick, simple slide that talks through the water treatment process and how the ground storage wells and now the surface water from Caw Lake will be blended and distributed to the community. All right, so to start off here, we've got 5 major infrastructure components. First one being the intake over at Caw Lake. I think most of you have probably had a chance to see that at some point in time over the last year. It is one remarkable engineering construction endeavor and piece of infrastructure. So it has a 72-inch or 6-foot diameter case tunnel that extends out into the lake nearly 500 feet. The wet well off on the bank that you've seen is nearly 100 feet deep and about 35 plus feet wide. That pump station, in today's design for that and for the immediate use, will push 10.5 million gallons per day of water across that 70-mile pipeline. It does have the capacity for future growth and expansion to pump up to 28 million gallons per day. So today, 10.5. Add some more pumps in there and do some other infrastructure across the pipeline. You could move up to 28 million gallons out of the intake. The pipeline, already said that it has 70 miles of 36-inch, so it's 36-inch coming out of that intake pump station till it gets to US Highway 177, which is the north-south highway between Stillwater and Ponca City. At that location, it scales down to a 30-inch pipeline and runs 30 inches for the remainder of the way to the water treatment plant on the west side of town here. On that pipeline, we've got 3 railroads that we've crossed. We've got 4 horizontal directional drills under certain bodies of water, and it has 24 tunnels that Garney and their contractors have been installing using a hand tunneling technique, but significant tunnels. For example, under I-35, Garney Construction did a 300-foot plus long hand tunnel under I-35, and that pipe's that casing is installed for that pipe. So there's also 8 ODOT crossings, so different state and county or state roads that we cross as well. So moving to the intermediate booster pump station here. That is just north of Garber. It's actually, most of that construction is nearly complete. Jason will be able to talk you through that with some great photos. But that pump station there lifts the pumping capability as we are going uphill from Caw Lake to the city of Enid about 230 feet. So that pump station is giving it the extra force to keep pumping it all the way to the water treatment plant. It does have a 1 million gallon storage tank on site as well. As we move to the water treatment plant on the west side of town here, so Chestnut to the far end as you go past the school, past Oakwood, and then the school, you can't miss it. The horizon has changed out there tremendously. So that water treatment plant is currently being built to provide 10.5 million gallons of potable drinking water to the citizens. It does have the future capacity to double that with additional construction. Think of it as a mirrored side to that to bring it up to 21 million gallons of distribution in the far future when needed. Also another nice benefit at that water treatment plant, the new one, it'll have 20 million gallons of raw water storage right there on site, which can be treated. So, and last is the distribution main you see here. There's a sign hidden up here and it says Chestnut. So that's Chestnut Avenue. A pipeline will come out of that new water treatment plant. It'll be a 30-inch, primarily ductile iron pipeline that goes about 2 3/4 of a mile to Mr. Hunter's Public Works water treatment plant. It'll tie in there to serve both the east and west distribution systems for the city. So, and again, that will, as it comes out of the water treatment plant, be a blended water, part of the groundwater plus part of the raw water from Caw Lake. So, okay, so that's what. Now let's talk about where, real quick here. So, difficult to see. Boy, this is crafty here. So here's Caw Lake. Here's the intake pump station, and this is Ponca City. We then move with 8 pipeline segments from east to west, coming across the land, crossing the Salt Fork River. We get across I-35. We come to Garber and the intermediate booster pump stations right in this area. And you can see we're running diagonal across the land. It is generally paralleling an existing utility corridor whereby there's an Oklahoma Gas and Electric high power overhead transmission system. So they have a 30 or 100-foot easement, and we're trying to parallel that to reduce the impact certainly on the landowners across that terrain. When we get down get down here around Garber, you can see we go horizontal. So there, the pipeline picks up parallel to Phillips Avenue. It follows Phillips Avenue across the north side of the city till you hit Garland. You go south on Garland a mile, then over on Willow a mile, and then down to the new water treatment plant. So that is the 70-mile pipeline. And of course, then you got the water treatment plant, and the tiny little purple line is that Chestnut water main to bring the water from the new plant to Mr. Hunter's Public Works water treatment plant. Okay, so moving on, that is where. Now let's talk about where we're at overall on the program. So you certainly can see on the far left, we've got 4 phases. Phases 1, 2, and 3 are for the most part complete, and we're heavy into phase 4, which is the construction phase, but started back in 2015, moved into our phase 2, which was preliminary design and engineering, into final design. In this past phase, you can see highlighted here, bold still, as land acquisition. Left that up there because as we continue the work, there certainly have landowners and items there as we build this work that we're going to need to continue being good stewards to. That certainly have cause for discussion and concern that we need to address. Not all things were fully completed in engineering as we obtained the original easements, and now we do have to come back to some landowners for surface features, and these primarily are air release valves that are required for the hydraulics of the system to protect that pipeline. So we have a few things that are left to do, and then over here where we're at today, we certainly have testing and inspection to support the construction operations. Garney's providing the construction management services, and the other thing we're doing in phase 4 right now is Garver has the responsibility to prepare what's called the automation programming, or in today's technological world, everything is automized or computerized. So believe it or not, the pumps all the way back at Call Lake and Ponca City, Mr. Hunter's going to be able to hit a touch screen on his tablet and be able to turn the pumps up, turn them down, make changes all the way back at Call Lake. So that automation we are providing. So now, who's doing what? So we've got the pyramid here of the 3 partners, the City of Enid, Garver, and Garney Construction. So on the left side, you can see 5 items that Garver is continuing to provide as the program manager at large. Engineering support, even though engineering design is complete, permits are all received at this point. There certainly is, as work progresses, opportunities to improve as construction goes forward. Owner's field observation. So Garver is providing, on behalf of the state as an SRF funded program, the oversight, 100% oversight as owners' representatives on all those pieces of infrastructure we talked through. So we've got folks in the field when the work is happening on your behalf. Talked about the automation programming already on the last slide, but that's that computerization. And last, system commissioning. Once the work is all ready and the water treatment plant, the entire system is ready to get fired up, once that starts happening, we're going to bring in our skilled, experienced lifetime operators that have been doing it their whole lives, and they're going to come in and provide piloting and co-piloting of that water treatment plant for 3 months to make sure that Mr. Hunter's team is absolutely ready to take the reins. Then on Garney's side, you can see they've got the construction management, the construction schedule, construction quality, construction inspection, and then system startup. So they're going to make sure all the equipment and all the facilities work properly from that mechanical standpoint for us to then integrate the automation and kind of computerized electronical standpoint to then tune the system. So next, quality management. So 2 sides here. You've got Garney on the left, Garver on the right. So Garney's got quality control and Garver has quality assurance. Garney's going to provide and has been 100% of that testing and inspection of all the work being performed across all that infrastructure. Garver's role is to provide 10% oversight. So we're checking the checker. We're there to make sure that the systems, processes that Garney is executing out there to maintain quality delivery of all this work is actually being functional and moving forward in that process. So, yeah, so you can see, you know, Garney does that specific stuff, and we go in and do the audits to make sure we're meeting the quality metrics. So, on the next slide here, some of the things we look at. Safety is a big one, and Jason will have good news to tell on that. Test results and inspections are paramount, of course. And of course, when there's work changes, that certainly causes a little bit of concern and can have issues on quality while you're midstream in the middle of construction, because you have to adjust, adapt to figure out what that change is. So we try to minimize those. On the right side of this chart, you'll see a bit of a performance chain, but think about that as being a total commitment to quality at every level. You can see you have Garney's contractor, who's the primary ones out there doing the work. Then Garney is your construction manager, and then Garver is your program manager, with our owner's representatives out in the field providing that oversight. All right, so last time we actually visited on a total program focus of status of the program. It was back in April, so it's been nearly 10 months since our last update. So real quick, I'm going to go through then and now. So when we last visited, we were dealing with some county road challenges. We had casings and tunneling change order due to some additional ones that were required for Garney. We worked through and resolved some travel constraints. We had permitting and agreements to complete, to the end that, you know, since 10 months ago, we actually have received the final storage and real estate agreement with the Corps of Engineers, fully executed. So, and then we had landowner actions that still needed legal remedy. So we had a lot then, and we had a lot done then. So. Also in June, we were needing to look at an option of possibly realigning an HDD. That no longer is necessary, so they have moved forward on that work. We had coordination with landowners. We really want to maintain and reaffirm our commitment to all these various landowners out there to be good stewards to them, of their land, of their crops, of their business, of their livelihoods. And the last one there, we did an extension with Garney's contract for substantial completion. That was necessary due to the time it took to receive the OEDEQ permit for the water treatment plant. So now, let's pick up on these. I think you've seen these slides you did for nearly 2, maybe even 3 years, as of about 10 months ago. But then you can see we had 7 remaining bridge or legal things that we needed to work through. We had 5 remaining of 6 Bureau of Indian Affairs parcels to acquire, and one parcel remaining on Chestnut Water Main. Now, it's all secured. I do have a nice yellow banner here saying pending landowner concerns, which I spoke about earlier. We do have some things to finish taking care and treating landowners right as work continues. Good news is, though, with everything now being secured, I'm not going to show you this slide ever again. Another one, this one as well, many years this was shared. So then you can see we had 1 remaining, and that would be the real estate agreement with the Corps of Engineers. We had 1 railroad to continue or get our permit on for Chestnut Water Main. We still had county roads to complete for Garfield County. And we had barely started the oil and gas encroachment agreements across the 70 miles. But this is everything from all the environmental, the DOT, DEQ, and such. So now, once again, they're all secured. Left this one yellow on the oil and gas. Right now, we have 1 that we're waiting for one of the oil and gas companies that have indicated they would look for some form of agreement, but haven't came forward with it. But putting that, this is all known permits have been completed with the oil and gas folks as Garney's crews move forward. They really don't come to talk business until you're actually ready to do that work. And they certainly do have boots on ground while Garney's doing that work to protect their own infrastructure. And happy to say that we've had no negative reports of any manner from the work and coordination that Garney's doing for crossing the oil and gas infrastructure out there. So you won't see those slides again either. That's it, we're done on them. All right, so construction support services. So Garver continues to provide archaeological, whoops, as it was, I jumped a slide ahead on myself. All right, backing up here. This is work that we have served the city on over this past 10 months that I know have been very intimate with all of us here. So the county road permitting, bald eagle mitigation support, we did get a permit that allows us to provide monitoring so that Garney can continue working and make sure we're not disturbing the eagles. There is one nest that is within the work zone, and we've gotten to watch the eagles. I have every time I go out there, I see them. So they're nesting right now, and I'm sure they have eggs at this point. So magnificent to watch out there. Tribal support, of course, design services we've had, and then certainly being that extension of the city staff to Morale and Gerald. Now, continuing on, archaeological impacts, we still have monitoring out there for archaeological, it could be anything from a flint stone, an arrowhead, to pottery, to certainly a potential dead bodies that you got to look at. So we look out for that. The tribes have people out there, and we have people out there at those sensitive areas monitoring as the work happens and occurs. Landowner impacts is constant and daily. That takes all effort, starts with Garney and their contractor, through us, through Morale, through Gerald. Oil and gas, we already talked about, but that's continuing. Permanent power to facilities, so all the way at the intake at Ponca City, you need power and utility out there to that booster pump station north of Garber to the new water treatment plant, bringing utilities in for the permanent power for those facilities. And last, we did have a USACE mitigation agreement for some fencing and cedar removal on their parcel that is completed at this time. So I'm about to hand it off to Jason to dazzle you with a lot of good photos. What I want to show here is then we had two-dimensional or a piece of paper design. I guess this one's in a, whoops, three-dimensional format here. And you can actually see this intake header now, the actual reality of that work. So you're looking at one image on paper and the real-life image in real time. So with that, Jason.
Good evening, Mayor, Commission. Thank you for your time. I guess before I get into this, and Eric, you might have to give me a tutorial how to make this work the way you did, but that one. I guess before I get started, many of us pride ourselves on being forward thinkers, looking in the future. I think if the message I could leave anybody here with tonight as we go through these photos, I'd ask everyone to reminisce and look back a little bit. There's been many past, present, there'll be future individuals, teams responsible for forward-thinking delivery of programs of this magnitude. And if we sit and take a moment, we've had a series of events, whether we look at the groundbreaking at the water treatment plant, whether we did the series of commission tours along the pipeline alignment, or we called it the TBM launch party at the intake. We did a few trips along Phillips Road. As we go through these photos, I'd ask each and every one of us to take a moment, reflect back, think about the hurdles and the challenges that have been incurred along the way. Programs of this magnitude aren't possible. They don't happen by accident. There will always be a few bumps in the road. But with the collaboration of the CMAR delivery approach, the end is in sight of delivering this program of this scale and magnitude. So with that, I'll move into the photos and some program and progress updates. Starting here, we've got some aerial imagery of the intake site. That's the Call Lake water supply. and overlooking the Call Lake Dam. It's off the boom of a crane that's presently on site. Zooming down a little bit closer, back to the TBM launch party, and there's some other pictures we'll get into related to the intake shaft, but this is where the program actually originates and starts, Call Lake intake, before it transmits the 70 miles onto the city of Enid on the western side of the water treatment plant. Eric had had a prior photo. Some of the marine efforts that are ongoing. This is a 3-tiered intake header assembly. It's there was a lot of extensive site mock-up efforts to make sure the parts and pieces of this elaborate puzzle fit and went together properly. Those efforts were in advance to the prior placement underwater, which are currently projected around March, April, but actually be April this year, presuming ideal weather conditions. The lake level's a little bit low, and it's posing some constraints with the barge and et cetera. But if you haven't been out in the area, you're nearing limited time and availability to actually see this structure before it's placed underwater. Another aerial looking back towards Hideaway Marina, where this structure is staged. And to the left of that photo is the barge and crane assembly that eventually be towed out back into Call Lake to facilitate the finding remainder scope of the marine activity. They'll actually tie this header pipe into the previously constructed microtunnel that extended roughly 500 feet out of the intake shaft into Call Lake. Closer up, probably a familiar location from the prior TBM launch parties. This is a view looking down at the intake shaft, and again, projects of this magnitude, there's always a few bumps and hurdles. Crews are working tirelessly to fight some infiltration of groundwater, but that's to be expected to an extent within 100 vertical foot descent downward through fractured rock and limestone. But we have, and this photo is a little past dated, but the first lift of concrete is up to the bottom of the pump cans. Moving forward, that concrete placement will continue vertically throughout the shaft up towards the final lift at the top of the wet well structure. Just a panoramic view looking across Call Lake back towards the intake header assembly. And a closer up photo of that intake, some prior conversations related to the stainless steel burst piping, the valve operating, et cetera, strapped to that intake header assembly. This is probably a little bit.
As you go through it, would you include the percentages you gave us yesterday, I believe, in a meeting for each of these major components?
Yes, sir.
Percentage complete?
Yes, sir. And if you don't mind, when I get to the end, I've got a high-level summary slide to capture those percentages.
Okay.
This is a little bit difficult to read, but essentially the red, if you can see that, is the already constructed pipeline. Moving from Enid segments 1 through 3. Currently, we have crews working in the tail end of segment 5, a portion of segment 6, segment 7, and segment 8. But just from a high-level summary of the totality of that pipeline, approximately 70% installed through close of February, and roughly 80% of the pipe delivered and staged. Over the next 2 to 3 months, we should have 100% of the pipe installed, and if we're looking a little bit further down the road, hopefully by summer, the totality of the pipeline's in the ground and installed. This is a high-level percentage of the pipelines. I won't focus too much on the percentages. This pertains to right-of-way preparations, but the primary factor of this is actually installed and delivered. Again, roughly the 70 and 83%. I wanted to reflect on this a moment. Although the directives weren't needed, I fully appreciate them because it's what we do. Eric had alluded to property owners being stakeholders, so one of the asks that Garney was given throughout management of this program was be responsible stewards of the property owners. And I know we've all seen this, but this is an example of some of the preparatory works that lead into startup pipe staging and part of startup pipe installation. But it's stripping and segregation of the topsoil along the edge of the right-of-way so that when we complete construction, we can return the property hopefully as good or better than before it started. The next phase, after the right-of-way was prepped, pipelines were staged. Now we move into the exciting part. This is some of the open cut 30-inch concrete bar wrap installation. Closer view, 30-inch section of a 303 bar wrap pipe within a trench box. This is an overview within segment 7. You know, this was leading into our construction prove-out. This is a photo of some 36-inch steel pipe staged on the right-of-way. It's be on the east side of Ponca. Back to the stakeholder comment. This is an example of some of the restoration efforts that went into the program in an attempt to try to return the right-of-way to condition of like or better prior to start of construction. In a near perfect world, when this project's fully constructed and fully restored, other than some pipeline appurtenances, pipeline markers, cathodic protection boxes, air release valves, or blow off or pipeline appurtenances, hopefully you can never tell we were here. A quick update on the tunnels. 22 of the 24 tunnels are complete. We only have 2 remaining. Looking for a scheduled return yet this spring, and by early summer, the 2 remaining tunnels are to be constructed. Moving from the pipelines to the intermediate booster pump station near Garver. This is a photo of the 1 million gallon storage tank. Within the intermediate booster pump station, just a quick photo of the header pipe assembly as well as electrical building. Closer up with electrical building and the HVAC system. Just a general overview of that site. You know, there's an overflow drainage structure in the event that there's a water surge or demand, so it doesn't overpressurize the tank. There's a means to evacuate that excess water. Leaving the intermediate booster pump station at the water treatment plant here on the west side of Enid off of Chestnut. Things considerably look different today. It's evidence on site that construction's going vertical. It's far beyond the days of the original groundbreaking. Moving into some of the progress photos at the water treatment plant. This is the GAC, or Granular Activated Carbon Facility. Again, vertical construction. This is a quick view of the blended water facility, just to kind of gain perspective of the manpower that you can see looking through the rebar cage and the vertical ascent in the background. This is a depiction of the filter building and pipe gallery. On the right side of that, you know, initially the program scheduled for 10.5 million gallons. On the right side of that are the provisions for a future, or simply a mere expansion. Another photo of the granular activated carbon facility. And I'll share a quick percentage before we get into the high level. At the water treatment plant, roughly 50% from a construction standpoint. At the intermediate booster pump station, to go backwards, probably north of 95% from the construction. There remains some electrical and SCADA that when you see the facility high-level summary, that percentage is going to appear to be lower. And this was kind of a then and a now, looking back on our CMAR procurement schedule. You know, essentially from September of 2020 through May of 2022, we advertised and solicited 30 separate bid packages. 3 of those were material supply, the remainder were work. This slide's hard to decipher, but it is a percent complete. Be happy to make handouts available towards more visible if need be, but every one of the bid packages per billing or payable request to date, we've itemized by percent complete. So this is reflective of those 30 priors. From a high level percent completion by the 5 facilities to date, roughly 61% complete cost of work. Breaking it down into the water treatment plant, right at the 50% that I'd mentioned previously. The raw water intake, currently 57%. You know, again, ongoing work at the, I'm gonna stop for a second, at the water treatment plant, tremendous amount of concrete, rebar placement, ongoing multiple structures. At the raw water intake structure, crews are actively working inside the shaft, working on that wet well construction. Once that finalizes, the crews will work on the, what we call the structural and shell, the mechanical outside of that. Concurrent with late this spring, the marine crews will return to finalize the intake header assembly within Call Lake. The Chestnut distribution main have not started that scope of work. Some of that forward thinking, we're still optimistic that scope of work can get kicked off by sometime this summer, maybe late summer. The raw water pipeline, now this includes some of the piping, valves, and components. It's roughly 77% from a program standpoint. And then back to the intermediate booster pump station, due to electrical and some of the SCADA controls, roughly 82% complete. Before I move on, any questions of any of the 5 facilities and where status is with construction today?
So that station that's out by Garber, in relationship to Garber, where is it directionally?
North. Yes.
By 5 miles?
No rough.
About 2.5 miles north of a main county road.
Okay.
And then, I'm trying to remember that, north south highway there with Garber, but it's the hard paved one out of the
Yes.
gas station.
Yep.
From there, 2.5 miles north, you'll take a right then and go 1.5 miles down a county road. And as soon as you just hang that right and head up the hill, if you look left on the horizon, you'll see that out there. So
Okay.
1.5 miles down there and look left, so you can't miss it. So we can certainly send you a map if you'd like.
Any other questions?
Rob, did you get your needed? Get what you needed?
That's what I want to see right there.
Okay, good. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, before you leave, when are we going to be done? He threw up a date that I don't think's accurate.
Administratively, we're still in discussion on that. That was a date that we're currently under contract for today.
Think you'll be done then?
Probably not.
That's what I wanted to hear. I don't want to mislead anybody.
Yeah,
The date that he put up there is probably not the end date.
it's not. If I was to share what I think I know today, based on what we see that lies ahead of us, I would say that date is shy in the 4 to 6 month range.
Full disclosure.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Eric, I'll pass it back to you.
Put that in simple terms on the scheduling. Jason's saying he's projecting construction effort to proceed to be near substantial completion by summer of 2024. All right, so to close us out here, Jason just talked a whole lot about the water treatment plant closing out, and you can see that is some pretty serious industrial construction work that's happening. You know, that is what we ultimately call the treatment train, and this is a flow chart here that I wanted to share just to very simply talk through that process of how that water ultimately is treated. So it starts out at the top left there with our 2 terminal storage reservoirs that provide that 20 million gallons of on-site raw water out of Caw Lake. It gets pumped by a pump station there to start passing through, again, what I'll call the treatment train here. The first step, though, it goes through is a process of ozonization to kill bacteria and purify the water. And next goes into a settling basins to pull away solid contaminants. At the bottom, it then moves through a second dosing of the ozonization, but the ozone. From there, it moves to, it's called granular activated carbon, but it's very simple to the refrigerator filter that you have in your refrigerators and have to swap out once a year, or the water that you can pour through a carbon filter, tap water to provide additional. Think of that exact same aspect at a macro scale here for this water. From then, it goes to a storage tank. So and at that storage tank, it gets blended then from one storage tank to another with the current ground well water that the city of Enid's been accustomed to for the life of the community here. So at that point, the ground well and the surface water gets blended. We're certainly aiming to match taste and odor, and certainly with those 2 different surface and groundwaters being mixed and going through this treatment process, I think the community's going to be in great shape for us to be able to serve long-sustaining, generational water quality and redundancy for the community, certainly beyond our lifetime. So from there, we'll get pumped out into the city through that Chestnut water main. So
I think this is the first time I've actually seen a flow chart. Sorry. Flow chart.
we'll give Commissioner Stallings credit for making the request here. All right, and last slide to close out here, just looking forward. We'll start at the bottom, and I know it's tough to see. So, you know, we began construction in April of 2021. We had a ribbon cutting, you know, and that was a micro start for Garney, but eventually had the ribbon cutting and they got fully mobilized and we got rocking. So the next one here is work hard and safe. So that's Garney's goal. At that point, as we keep doing this hard work and being safe about it, you can see from the photos that the structural work is being completed. So we're coming close to getting all the equipment on hand to where they'll start installing many different components of equipment across all the various infrastructures. Once that equipment's installed along with the electrical component packages, we're going to start bringing in that automation programming system with it. From there, we'll do that system commissioning. So Garney will make sure all that equipment works properly. So do a functions check on all of it. Integrate the electrical programming components or the computerized programming components, and then we get to start doing that holistic commissioning or tuning, you know, and that's all the way back to the pumps that are like a straw sucking water out of Caw Lake to move it all the way to that very simple treatment process I just showed you, which is actually quite complex when it's all said and done. But that'll be that system commissioning. At that point, we have substantial completion, and that's when we'll start doing a operational handoff with David Hunter's operations staff and do that piloting, co-piloting to be able to turn it over to the city for securing your long-term future and water resources. So with that, are there any questions?
No? Okay, thanks, appreciate it. It's a great update. It's looking good and we're getting excited, so thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, next up, item 3.4, discussion on the process. Oh, I'm sorry. 3.3, Call Lake Water Supply Program Financial Update. Sorry, Aaron, wouldn't want to leave you out. That's why I got this other, okay.
You're good, Commissioner. So back in December, I gave you an update through the end of November, so we're just gonna hit the highlights of what's happened over the last 3 months with the program financial-wise, so you guys are up to date on that. In this last bar, you'll see we're about 73% of what we budgeted this year. We budgeted to bring in $9.6 million in the 1% sales tax, and we brought in just over $7 million through 8 months. So we're tracking a little ahead, looking good there. This is the total of how all of that money that has been brought in has been spent on the sales tax. This pie has grown by $2.79 million over the last 3 months. We've brought in $2.731 million in collections, and then we've added an additional $59,000 in interest that we've earned over that 3-month period as well on those funds. And again, no additional loan payments have been made. Those are semi-annual, so we're still sitting at $30 million in loan payments, and that leaves $24 million in the account. Of that $24 million, $20 million is invested in T-bills. The other 4.3 is available for loan payments that will be due this month, later this month. We'll look at, we do have one note maturing on the T-bills at the end of this month, and we'll update the cash flow forecast and see what we need to do as far as reinvesting and what's available with our new payments that are coming due within the next year. This is the status of the current loans related to the Call Lake Supply. Again, the FAP loans from 2016 and the SRF loans from 2018 are fully drawn. At this time, the FAP loan from 2018 is 77% of the way drawn down. There's $10 million left in that account. The 2019 FAP has still not been drawn at this point, and the 2020 SRF has been 63% drawn down. Overall in the program, we have added interest for the last 3 months of $600,000 from those FAP loans sitting there in interest, and we've drawn down $28.7 million in payments out to contractors on the program in the last 3 months. Overall, we have drawn down 59% of the funds in loans related to the program. And again, this slide has not changed since last time. It's exactly the same. We have not made any more loan payments, so everything sits as it was 3 months ago. And then the last slide here is just a budget status update. Again, still the same $824,000 program budget. Through the end of February, we have expended $201.8 million on the program. We have contracts of $131 million, and we have $167,000 left. A lot of that just in the program budget, still available to talk about or take care of some of those landowner requests and things that we need to take care of that haven't been awarded to any particular person to take care of at this time. Of the $131 million that's encumbered, we have approximately $10 million left on our contract with Garver, $119 million left to pay on the Garney contract, and then the rest of the $3 million makes up tribal and county agreements that we have, environmental, and some other landowner things that we already have earmarked in the program. Are there any questions on the finances that I can answer for you?
No. Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Aaron. Yep. Okay. Item 3.4, discussion on the process and tentative schedule to rename a portion of Johnson Street after Lindell Carr.
Yes, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, this is just an overview and a discussion piece for your consideration. There's consideration to rename a portion of Johnson Street, the north portion and a portion of the south after Lindell Carr. Previously, the city has gone through a street renaming process on a few occasions, the most recent of which was in 2021 for Reverend Alfred Baldwin Jr. Way. There were other renaming efforts back in 2019. Typically, the process, at least the last process, involved public outreach, a public hearing, similar to what you do with a rezoning effort, and adoption of an ordinance by the Board of Commissioners. The public hearing process would involve outreach and notice to the affected property owners. We estimate that to be about 47 addresses along Johnson as it stands now. There are another 40 lots that abut Johnson but may be addressed differently, like they're corner lots. So that gives you an idea of the scope and magnitude of outreach. It would be noticed to affected property owners. Of course, coordination with our service providers, our police department, our fire department, and emergency services. Coordination with the Postal Service, USPS, the postmaster, who we did reach out to today to figure out what that looks like. It's estimated that these above steps would take about 90 to 100 days, including outreach, a public hearing or two, if that's what the commission desires, in preparation of an ordinance for your adoption in the future. And as I said, if an ordinance is adopted, our police and fire, 911 system, and other emergency services will assist in setting those new addresses up so that we're up to date in that respect. The Postal Service has indicated we would notify them if the ordinance is adopted, if that's the direction, that the transition from old to new addresses could take a few months. That's all we have at this point in time. So think of it as a point in time, could be several months, where that old mail or the old addresses mail will still be delivered, and at some point there'll be a cutoff, but we'll certainly coordinate with the community on that. This concludes my presentation. As I said, it's for information only, and just to give you an idea as to the tentative process and next steps and schedule should direction be received to proceed.
Okay. The only question, if somebody had an address, just using a hypothetical number, 45 Johnson Street, would it now be 45 Lydell Carr? I mean, would the 45 stay the same, or does the whole thing change?
That's a very good question, Mayor. That would be the intent, but our code section is the one that assigns the addresses. And of course, we'll work very close with the police and fire to do that. We'll try and keep it as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
We may not be able to, but we'll do our best to do that, because the name change in and of itself is enough of a change, but if the numbers, it could throw everything into disarray, so we'll do what we can.
Okay.
So we're talking about 45 homes that would have to reconfigure their address based on your number. The other lots, we're not too worried about, since probably mail isn't delivered to a lot. So, is that correct?
Well, it's about 45 current addresses that take their address off Johnson. The other 40 or so are addressed differently. They could be corner lots. There's about 8 vacant lots along Johnson, give or take a couple, that may get new addresses if and when they get built out. So that's the order of magnitude.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Any others? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's it. It's about 6:13. We'll go ahead and adjourn now and reconvene for the meeting at 6:30.